Anne, those who worked with her at Family Council, those who have been part of Anne's life through the Espanola Valley Arts Center, through her service on the board of Peak, those who worked with Anne in the Los Alamos Association of Prevention of Child Abuse, now known as the Family Strength Network, FSN, and those who were in the garden club and book groups with Anne as well. Anne was a servant to her community and an artist and a weaver. So today we gather together to celebrate the many threads that went into making the tapestry of her life. So thank you all for being here today in this space, remembering Anne. Again, if you're watching online, hello. We are glad you are with us virtually. And hello to Anne's family and friends watching us online. Thank you for being present with us here. So hear these opening words. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another when we would accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone. We need one another in the hour of defeat, when with encouragement we might endure and stand again. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us. It is our tradition in the Unitarian Universalist faith to light our flaming chalice at the start of every service. This flaming chalice is a symbol that represents comfort, sanctuary, protection, justice, light, and love. Here are our chalice lighting words for today's celebration of life for Anne Durnell Shafer. Hear these words from the Reverend Christine Robinson. In our time of grief, we light a flame of sharing, the flame of ongoing life. In this time, when we search for understanding and serenity in the face of loss, we light this sign of our quest for truth, meaning, and community. As we remember Anne Shafer, may today bring forth transformation in ourselves, from grief, healing, from memory, wholeness, and from celebration, love. Please join in, stand as you are willing and or able, in body and or spirit, to sing our opening hymn, For All That Is Our Life. So if you would like to stand now and sing. Anne did indeed build the common good and make her own days glad. So those words were appropriate, as she was a servant and in service to many, caring for lots of people and doggos. So hear this reading and of reflection now that speaks to weaving. Anne was a weaver. So let us hear these words. O spinner, weaver of our lives, your loom is love. May we who are gathered here be empowered by that love to weave new patterns of truth and justice into a web of life that is strong, beautiful, and everlasting. As many of you knew, Anne was indeed a weaver. These are some of her woven garments here. This as well is one of her woven garments as well. She was a beater as well. This is a woven purse with loomed beading on it as well that she made. She made fabulous things. There are also more pictures out on the table and some of her garments that she wove as well. So take a look at those if you haven't yet, as we'll process out and you'll have time during the reception to look at more. That one is pictured on your program on the back as well. A phoenix rising from the ashes, and we thought that would be a great one to put on the back of it, kind of symbolizing Anne now as this phoenix, right? Some more beautiful, beautiful, very professionally done beading works. And there's lots more. So please, yes, enjoy taking a look at all of what she has crafted and created. She was a weaver, a beater, a crafter, a person who served and cared for others and her doggos. And Anne was also a leader. So today we are gathered here to celebrate the many threads of Anne's beautiful life, to celebrate the woven tapestry that she created, that woven tapestry of her life. I'm also wearing this beautiful stole that Anne gave to me when I left to complete my ministerial internship. Anne was the first person who gave me a stole, and I will forever cherish this stole that she made. There are many people here today that have been touched by Anne and her life. Some of you all here today will be sharing some of the different threads of her life. Thank you again to everyone for being here today, speaking to and listening to the stories of the woven tapestry that is the life of Anne Durno Shafer. So one of the threads that is present in Anne's life tapestry is the thread of serving others. Anne was born in Michigan and then went east to Rhode Island and Boston for her studies. Anne lived a purpose-filled life as a social worker, helping and serving others. She began her studies with a BA from Brown University, a master's in education from Boston University, and an MSW from George Williams College. She met her husband, Bob Shafer, back east, and they married in Boston in 1968. They were married for 44 years, up until 2011, when Bob passed away. Bob and Ann settled in Los Alamos, where Bob was a scientist at the lab. Ann loved living in the West and loved reading the novels of Michael McGarrity. Maybe some of you are familiar. Ann worked for a time at Family Council here in Los Alamos as a social worker and at the Senior Center as a case manager for our elder population. Not only did Ann commit her life career to being a social worker and serving others, she was also committed to the care and protection of those most vulnerable in our community, children and elders. She was a case manager for elders at the Senior Center, and she also worked with the New Mexico Prevention of Child Abuse Association. This thread of her serving others in the community was strong. Anne also wove the thread of leadership into her tapestry. Weavers, as many of you may be here present as well, are creative leaders and visionaries in that they set the warp threads, the vertical threads that go on the loom, and the weft threads, the horizontal threads. They set the pattern, the heddles, the shuttles, the reed, the weights. They guide the process on the loom using all the tools mentioned above to create a beautifully designed tapestry or textile or piece of clothing. Hand-woven textiles require every decision, adjustment, and detail to be made by the weaver. Weaving is an intensely skilled, physically demanding craft that requires precision, patience, and deep knowledge. These characteristics of the weaver, I am sure, helped Anne in her leadership as a social worker and as board president of many community organizations. As a leader, Anne served on the board of the Los Alamos Senior Center and was president for 2 terms. She also served on the board of Peak in 2014 through 2018, and this was when Peak was undergoing the building of their new facility. She was also on the board and served as president of the Los Alamos Association of Prevention of Child Abuse, now known as Family Strengths Network. She served on the state board of the New Mexico Prevention of Child Abuse Association and the state board of the New Mexico Association of Social Workers, and also served on the board of the Espanola Valley Fiber Arts Center and was also the board president there for 2 terms. That woven thread of leadership is strong in Anne's tapestry of life. Another important thread in Anne's tapestry is the thread of her church community here. Anne served on numerous committees here in our church that I'm sure many of you can name. She was also very involved with the hospitality committee here, and Anne also served on the committee on ministry for numerous years, supporting the minister and the ministry of this church. I do also want to say that Anne was a very generous person in giving to this church community. This beautiful building that we are gathered in right now wouldn't have been possible without Anne's generous donation to our church's capital campaign to build this building. Anne loved this church and loved this community. Anne had her usual spot. She sat in here in her sanctuary in the 2nd row right there, and she would tell you if you were in her spot. Anne was direct and feisty for sure, and I love that about her. When I first moved to Los Alamos back in 2014, Barb Franzak and Susan Gisler invited me to Anne's 75th birthday party at her house. The party was there at her house and was with the church community and other friends surrounding her and celebrating with her. It was at Anne's birthday party that I was first introduced to our fun and loving church community. And let me just say, Anne and our UU community know how to throw a fun party. The thread of her church community, her church family, was very important in her life's tapestry. I would like to share one more thread of Anne's life and tapestry in a story that I have from one of my visits with her. This is the thread of Anne's feisty, fun, and direct character. This past year, on her last birthday in October, I was fortunate to get to visit Anne. I brought her some chocolate and wished her a happy birthday. We walked up to the dining hall together at the Los Alamos Assisted Living, and Anne liked to give me all the gossip on the ladies at the dining room table. And on this day of her birthday, Anne came into the dining room announcing that it was her birthday. She asked the dining hall staff if they had a cake they would give to her for her birthday, and unfortunately, they didn't have cake that day. So Anne also went up to a man sitting by himself and announced that it was her birthday and that he should wish her a happy birthday and give her his cookie. And he said happy birthday, but didn't give her his cookie. Anne had a good sense of humor, which I appreciated. And Barb's gonna speak a little bit more about that too. So since Anne wanted cake for her birthday, I went and got her a piece of cake and brought it to her the next day. Tara came with me. She was sleeping, and so we left it in her room. And so unfortunately didn't get to sing happy birthday to her with Tara and her kiddos, but I'm glad we got to drop that off for her, the cake that she wanted. I'm so glad I was able to get to know Anne's feisty, fun, and humorous character here in our church community and as that thread of her life as well. Anne was a weaver of her own path. Anne was a very strong and courageous woman. Even after her fall, where she unfortunately hit her head, she made her own autonomous decision not to undergo the brain surgery needed because there were lots of risks associated with doing that. This was a courageous, wise, and strong decision to make at that moment. Not everyone at the end of life gets to make those decisions for themselves, but Anne was fortunate to have gotten to make her own decision about death. Anne was a weaver and leader of her own path. She was a leader here in our church community and the wider Los Alamos and northern New Mexico community. Anne appreciated beauty and loved living in the West. Anne loved her Scottish Terriers and her last dog, Mackie. Anne loved a good party. And Anne's care for others and her generosity continue to weave more tapestries and stories here in our church. Anne, your beautiful life tapestry has blessed us here in this church community and the wider Los Alamos and northern New Mexico community. Thank you, Anne, for serving others. And thank you for breathing your life into this church community and into this beautiful building. And you are indeed a visionary, a weaver, a lover of beauty, and you will be forever a part of weaving this church's tapestry into the future. Thank you, Anne, for your generosity and your commitment to serving others. Today we are honored and blessed to be celebrating your life's tapestry. now I would like to invite some other folks from our congregation to come up. Susan Gisler first, and then Barb Franzak, and then Melissa Bartlett, to share about some of the other beautiful and fun threads of Anne's life with us today. And after the three of them share, we will then open it up to others here to share about Anne and the threads of her life and stories of her life that you were a part of as well.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. I'm Susan Gisler. I was a friend of Anne's for many years, and so I've written some words. Some of them are in her own words herself. So, although I had known Bob and Anne when we first joined the church here in the early 1990s, I got to know Anne quite well in 2013 when we were on the Committee on Ministry together. Anne was usually quiet. Also, her hearing loss was starting to affect her a bit during those years. But I got glimpses of her sense of humor, her interest in people, her intelligence, and her creativity. Around 2018, I and others at the church here got to know her a bit better after her hospitalizations and some changes that affected her ability to manage her financial and home affairs. But what I really want to offer right now is a glimpse into her early life and her love and interest in her family, and how she built a form of family here when she and Bob lived in Los Alamos. Sometime in her later childhood, and I would guess it was about when she was a sophomore in high school, she put together an autobiography in which she wrote about the origins of her family in the US and her great-grandparents, her grandparents, her parents, her brother Pete, and her close friends. And you can see that book. It's on the table out there, and it has a wooden cover, and she even did some wood burning into it, and it has beautiful pictures of her family as well as friends of hers. But I'll only share some of the highlights. You can read through this very precious book to look at the life through the eyes of Anne as a young teen. So first, her great-grandfather, George Durno, came from Scotland with his family as a two-year-old in 1838, and they settled in Pennsylvania. After serving in the Civil War in the Union Army, he married Elizabeth and moved to Springfield, Iowa, where he served as postmaster, mayor, justice of the peace, and editor of the town newspaper. Elizabeth's family owned the Christman's hardware store. So there's a family that's already started to serve their community. Both her grandmother, Berdinia, and her grandfather, William, attended Cornell College in Iowa, where William founded the daily paper at the University of Chicago. William learned to read and write Chinese. He collected Japanese prints and Chinese figurines, and any one of you who might have ever been to her house probably saw these on the wall and in her dining room on some of the furniture there, and they really were precious and beautiful. Anne wrote of other famous ancestors. One was Colonel Thomas Henderson, who was the Speaker of the House of Representatives in our country after the Civil War. And also Jefferson Davis, the Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States during the Civil War. So these are the things that, were just in the genes of Anne's family, in the Durno family. Her mother's family came from Netherlands in 1872, and her great-grandfather founded the Michigan Trust Company, and that part of the family settled in Grand Rapids. Anne was born in Grand Rapids on October 11th, 1939, and in her immediate family, she felt like she inherited her love of writing from her mother, who wrote scripts for local organizations and also wrote articles in the newspapers about community events and things going on. Her dad had a wholesale lumber business, but through her dad, she acquired her love of sailing and photography. Her brother also, her brother Pete, who hopefully is watching this also, was a senior at the time in high school and also loved sailing, photography, hunting, fishing, and writing. She loved her childhood home, and she wrote how lucky she was to be in that family and to live where she did. She wrote of climbing the cherry tree in her backyard, playing with dolls and friends, and she wrote of the childhood joy of Christmas Day, waking up with her brother to find presents under the Christmas tree. She also spoke of her shyness and quiet nature and of wanting to grow and improve through her life. She expected to become a writer and follow the footsteps of her family, but especially her mother. She really looked up to her mother. She wanted to know people who were loving and giving. And she was a young idealist, eager to grow and contribute her talents to the world. And what I got from her own words in this book that she wrote was a deep love and respect for her family and gratitude for the way she was raised. She found her own family here with Bob, and they shared their love for travel, collecting art, hiking, and biking. Although they never had children, they supported many of the organizations, as Tina mentioned, in Los Alamos that was focused on children and childhood education, the precursor of the Family Strength Network, PEAK, which is the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, and Anne was also a big sister. She had a young school-age girl, and she would spend time with her each week during school lunch period. Both Bob and Ann were members of this church, which became their family in so many ways. She served as a volunteer on the different committees and were regular attendees. And her membership in many of the other groups in Los Alamos, as you all might know, was her extended family. She was still quiet and reserved, but thrived with the connections at the Fiber Arts Guild, the Garden Club, the book clubs, the Pajarito Environmental Education Center, and the Senior Center. Her work as a social worker, both for the Family Council and Senior Center, reflected her values of serving and of serving people. So although she didn't express it very well or very often to other people, she did love her family and spoke of her brother and sister-in-law, Pete and Eleanor. She kept and showed pictures of her nephews and her niece and their families from Christmas cards in the past. She often showed me those cards over and over again towards the end of the time she was in her house. She was very proud of her family and proud of who they were becoming. One of her neighbors across the street, Amber Coffey, and her husband and her daughters was not able to make it today. Amber called me, and she had to be at an event for her daughter down in Albuquerque. But she befriended them. Amber sent me this story, and so I think I will read this to you because it was very sweet what Amber wrote. We moved in across the street from Anne 8 years ago, and shortly after, our friendship emerged when Anne would very slowly walk her dog, Mackie, back and forth as we did yard work out front. Initially, she was always busy and on the go. However, when everyone was trying to stay isolated and healthy during COVID, we offered to bring Easter dinner over to her. Anne stated she would rather come over and eat with us. So we proceeded to sit our family outside at a safe distance from Anne. But if you know Anne, you know she's going to do what she wants to do. And by the time dinner was over, she had moved her dinner tray all the way across the deck until she was part of the family table. We learned that Anne loved being part of our family's celebrations and really loved a home-cooked meal. She also enjoyed when our daughters would help pull out her family Christmas decorations, and she could tell them all about her history. She adopted us. Like the time when she called the police about possible intruders when my daughter had invited some kids over for a movie, or when she walked in the house looking for my husband to fix her garage, which she accidentally backed up into. Yeah. We saw some of the damage from the cars from some of those things. She was a character, and she always made us laugh. So that was Amber's contribution to our service here. I personally felt like she was family. I related to her as a friend, but also almost like an aunt, because I had uncles her age. I and others tried to help her through the difficult health problems, house appliances breaking down, leaks from her upstairs bathroom, bills that had been forgotten, taxes that were due, appointments with doctors, hairdressers, and groomers for her dog. And as family members often are, she was most times appreciative, but other times quite incensed with the interference in her affairs. And she didn't hesitate to tell us that. She hated to be told what to do, and she didn't like to be prodded to do the things that she didn't think were necessary. She prized her independence and feared loss of control over her affairs. And don't we all feel that way? I miss Anne. I miss seeing her beautiful creations, her sense of humor, her observations of people around her that she made in restaurants and other places that can be overheard easily. If there is another place that we move on to after death, I wish her love and ease and that she's free of pain and sadness. But at any rate, I really hope she can hear clearly. But her contributions to this community will always live on in remembrance. And as I said, I will miss her a lot.
My name is Barbara Franzak. I was a friend of Anne's and one of her many caregivers. Some of the comments that I wrote, we did not, Susan and Reverend Tina and I did not compare notes ahead of time, but darn, some of the stuff I'm going to say is some of the stuff that they remembered about her also, just some of the funny stuff. I wrote a goodbye letter to her to let everybody know just what a unique and creative soul she was. So I hope I can get through this. Dear Anne, we first met about 10 years ago at church. You caught my eye because, in my opinion, you were the best dressed woman in church. You always wore a brightly colored top, matching beaded jewelry that you created, and you always had manicured fingernails to top off your look. You were never shy about voicing your agreement or dismay at others' sense of fashion. You often put me on high alert in public because I never knew if your unfavorable comments would be heard by the perpetrator. You hated my jeans with the holes in the knees, even though I told you that was in style. I know you missed Bob, and you always appreciated a handsome man. Anytime I asked the question, "Do you need anything?" your response was always, "A man." You followed that up with, "I don't know what I would do with him, though." But you used your advanced age as permission to comment on the male physique. When we would go to the grocery store together, if the fire truck was in the parking lot, once again, I'd be put on high alert. You'd tell the firefighters how good-looking they were if I didn't steer you away from them. I am certain that you delighted in embarrassing me and that poor gentleman. You were an avid reader of fun adventure novels. One of your favorite authors was Sue Grafton. You asked me several times to include the following quote at your celebration of life So here goes. Thinking is hard work, which is why you don't see a lot of people doing it. Your quirky sense of humor always amazed me. You and I had some tough decisions to make together: selling your car, moving you into assisted living, and helping you rehome your longtime companion, Mackie. I was never sure if you forgot or forgave me for those hard decisions, but I hope it was the latter. I wish I had known you in your younger years when you were working, traveling, hiking, gardening, beading, weaving, and volunteering at church and other institutions. I've no doubt that you are not one to sit idle. You were a strong, proud woman who usually rejected any comforting or affection. In your last few days when you were in ICU, I was finally able to hold your hands for just a few moments. That was a treasured memory for me. Your generosity and others made it possible for me to stand in this beautiful building today, and I am so grateful for that. You will be remembered as a colorful, feisty, smart, talented, generous soul, and I hope you are in a better place. Goodbye, my friend. You will be missed.
Hi, my name is Melissa Bartlett. I did not know Ann Shafer quite as well as Barb and Susan Gisler, but the threads of my life and the threads of her life intersected in a number of really interesting ways, I think. I first met her in 1997 on the studio tour. I was relatively new to town. I did pastels, and she, of course, did her wonderful weaving and her beadwork. I am not a weaver, but I have friends who are, and their comment on her stuff said it was just first-rate, professionally done, amazing technique and beautiful colors. So I learned to appreciate it. After a while, she actually asked me to do a portrait of her dog, Rosie, who was a Scottish Terrier. She had a series of Scottish Terriers, and then she got Mackie, who was a poodle. And that kind of intersected my art thread with my dog thread, because I'm a dog person, and I teach dog obedience classes and things like that. So I was always interested in her dogs. I was very grateful at the end of her life when the animal clinic of Los Alamos found a solution for Mackie, because that can be a real heartbreaking situation when older people are no longer able to take care of their dogs. So it's a good one for you guys. He's very happy and very well taken care of now. Thank you. Another thread that I had with her was the social work part. For a lot of her life, she was a geriatric case manager. And she would do the things such as taking people to doctor's appointments, making sure bills got paid, making sure family who lived far away were kept aware of all the issues, and she was really good at it. And I know that because I talked to her about my own mother when my mother lived back in Northern Virginia and I was here and my mother started having some issues. I found Anne to be very professional, very comforting, and very kind. And I always appreciated her help in that matter. It gave me a different perspective and kind of gave me guidelines of what to expect and how to handle those things. So I always appreciated that. And lastly, my caring committee thread intersected with Anne in these last few years. The whole caring committee helped Anne do things, especially Susan and Barb, and also the neighbors, Christy and Amber, and those people all pulled together to kind of keep Anne going in her house. I gave her rides. She loved to attend anything that involved food. So so any of the UU events here where we had snacks or food, by God, Anne wanted to go. The Friday night dinners where the church would get together, Anne would go, even though it was really hard for her in those noisy environments with her hearing aids to really hear anything. But she was going to be there and participate. I have to relate a story where I had told her about a memorial for someone that she knew, and she had not remembered it. And I went to pick her up, and she was actually starting to eat her lunch, I think, or perhaps had already finished her lunch at the at Aspen Ridge, formerly known as Aspen Ridge. And I said, well, would you like to come? And there's going to be refreshments afterwards. And I asked her first, would you like to come? And she said, no, I never liked that person anyway, which kind of shocked me. And then I said, well, there's going to be a bunch of people that you do know there, and there's a nice reception afterwards. And she said, oh, well, in that case. And she came. The other thing that happened was I usually drove a Subaru Outback, which was pretty easy for her to get into. And then the family car that I drive now is a Grand Highlander, which is a beast. It's really big, and it's quite high off the ground. And the first time I went to pick her up in the Grand Highlander, I parked, and she came out in front of Aspen Ridge. And I said, oh, Anne, let me back up so that it's against the curb, and that'll give you like an extra 6 inches to get into the car. Because I have trouble getting into that car sometimes. And she said, oh, Melissa, for heaven's sakes, I can get into the car. And she yanked open the door, and she leapt into it, which just surprised the heck out of me. She was very independent. She did not want you to help her do things like that, which I thought kind of kept her going for a long time. But anyway, I'd like to turn this over to the memories that you guys have about Anne Shafer, and to say, Anne, I'm really glad that our paths and our threads crossed. It was a pleasure.
So now we'd like to open up this space to people here in the congregation to share more memories and stories and threads of her life. So if you would like to share something, raise your hand and I can bring the mic to you.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Joyce Saug, and I wanted to share participation that Anne did in our religious education program, because I'm sure many of you don't know how she participated in that. We used to have this program called Special Friends in the spring, and the elders in the church would adopt a child from our RE program and be their grandparent, their aunt, their uncle, or whatever. And Anne signed up to do that for a number of years. And one year she was my daughter's special friend. And she invited Irene over every weekend, and they would make paper beads, and they would weave stuff, and she was just great. And my daughter Irene remembers Anne fondly for that special relationship that they had. The other thing is that every 3 or 4 years we would take our high school youth group to Boston It was, there's a lot of history there. It's the headquarters of our Unitarian Universalist Association. And Anne would volunteered 1 year to be a chaperone on that pilgrimage to Boston. And I really appreciated her coming. And she had lived in Boston, so she knew a lot of places that we could go and eat and visit.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, Kirsty.
My name is Kirsty Rock, and just some of the other comments that I've heard today already kind of sparked some memories. But Anne really did know what she wanted, and once when Dan and I were driving her to book group, that she was a member of our book club for about a decade, and she talked about how she met her husband Bob, and I wish I remembered more detail, but I do remember that she said she was on a bicycle tour that he was on, and she said, well, I really liked the way he looked. And so I pedaled real hard to stay up with him. And it's really good that she did, because they had a good marriage that lasted so many years. And some of her independence even came up. Well, there's one thing she did that really surprised me quite a few years ago. Now, she had had a stroke in the evening, and she said she thinks she was on the floor for about 30 minutes, but she didn't call anybody until the next morning when she called me and said, can you come over and take care of Mackie? Because she knew I'd known Mackie for a long time, since he was in the animal shelter. And she said, well, I'm going to call the EMTs because I had a stroke last night. Wow. Wow. So I came over, and I was there when the EMTs arrived. But yeah, some of her, yeah, I was amazed that she had done that. And she was, as has been mentioned, a member of our garden club for almost 30 years. And she was president twice. And I think the last garden club meeting that I remember her being at, we were doing something called pounding flowers, which someone had brought in pansies, I think, pansy petals, and we pounded those onto paper, and then you would sketch outlines around them to make a design or make them look like a picture of flowers. And I remember Anne did such a beautiful job. I mean, she was so artistic. But yeah, now I think that was her last garden club meeting. She also, I just thought I'd share a few book club recommendations, since I had a few listed here. Michael McGarrity was listed, and that book that we read that she recommended of his was Backlands, which took place in the Tularosa Basin of southern New Mexico. And I had a chance to drive through that some years back for a garden club convention, and it is absolutely beautiful, just as it was described in the book. But Backlands is part of a series. So if you're interested, you might want to check out Michael McGarrity. There was Death Comes to Pemberley. It's a mystery by P.D. James, Where the Crawdad Sings, which I guess has been made into a movie, Delia Owens. Safe from the Sea by Peter Guy, and she recommended a couple of historical fictions, Circling the Sun by Paula McLean, and I Was Anastasia by Ariel Lahan. And I really remember the latter one, I Was Anastasia. It was kind of a, fantasy made up of what might have happened to that daughter of the, Russian oligarchs. But still, it was a very enjoyable book. So, and last of all, I know how much she loved Mackie. I'm so glad that he is with Lindy from the animal clinic, and he's looking so happy. And He's a wonderful little guy. The caring committee and I kind of tried to take him on walks and spend time with him when she was in rehab after a heart attack. And he really didn't like to leave his house. He was very attached to Anne and his house. I could get him to go a little ways sometimes. But thank you.
Others, yeah, Susan. Yeah, put it right at your mouth. There you go. Is it on? Oh, it's not on. There we go. Now it's on. There we go. Okay.
Where was I? One of the things that I tried to find out about Anne, because I thought it would cheer her up, would be to get to know her dog and to find out if there was something I could do for her when we were all together, or if she had if she wanted to go somewhere and didn't want to take her dog. So every once in a while we would get into this conversation, and then we moved on to other things. And when I started to join this church or this community, Anne was so hilarious. She goes, "You come every time there's something going on here. When are you going to join?" And that's my favorite thing about her, because she had a sense of humor, but you had to dig deep for it sometimes. Thank you.
Others. Does anyone else? Yeah, Sue.
I'll give a story from Peak and from Anne's time on the Peak board. She was on the board during the time when we were creating the exhibits because for hearing loss, she didn't participate a lot. But she heard me loud and clear when I said something about, well, we're thinking of having a an exhibit based on harvester ants, because they make those neat little mounds, and that we were going to have it have a nest underneath it where you could see all the pathways. Well, she heard me, and she said, that was one of the few times she mentioned, spoke up at the board meeting and said, "That is a dumb idea." She said, "Those are going to get out and they will go everywhere." And we said, well, we'll double check. And we talked to the fellow who was making the nest, and he assured me he'd never had a blowout before. Well, of course, you know what happened. We came in, apparently they came in one time and there were ants everywhere. And none of us ever had the nerve to tell her she was right.
That's great. Thank you, Sue. Others? If there's any? Oh,
I'm Nyla Butler Moore, the music director here. One time I sat with Anne at a stewardship dinner, and this speaks to her love of food and party. So we were just visiting with the people who were gathered. Then the food came out, and I said, "Wow, there's some really good things to eat. Why don't we go get something?" And she said, "I think I'm gonna taste the wines first." And then one time, the previous minister, Reverend John Cullinan, was thinking about having a service to recognize the elders. And he suggested to the staff that we just begin to talk to people to see how they would feel about that kind of a recognition. So I mentioned it to Anne. She was almost 80 years old. She said, "You tell him I am not an elder, and I don't appreciate that."
Thank you. That's, you can hear, yeah, right. Yeah. Any others? Oh, yeah.
I didn't know Anne well before I started working here, but I remember meeting her at tea time. And so we went around introducing ourselves and saying our names, and she said a completely different name. And it was so funny. So right away, I just was so struck by her sense of humor. Because then we went back around, and she's like, oh, I'm Anne. And I was like, oh, and it's not Carolyn, or I can't remember what she said, but it was so funny. And then Frances, that's what she said, Frances. Yeah, she made up a story, yeah. And then I got to go with Barb and her to the friendship quilt exhibit, and she told us a story about when she was a kid, how important sailing was to her, and how her family had this sailboat, and how they sold it so that she could go to school, so her and her brother could go to school, and she said that was a good decision, but she loved that boat, and that was really neat to hear that story. And then just now hearing these stories about how she, so Family Strengths Network was a big part of my life, and to know that she was part of that and bringing that, I'm just so grateful for her legacy and what she's given to all of us. Thank you.
I have a story to tell about drinking. We have the Sunday night book group, which Tom and I and Kirsty and Dan here all belong to. And we usually, when we begin our evening, we have hors d'oeuvres and wine. And we have a liquor cabinet in the living room. And on the cabinet was this bottle of Boston Irish cream. And Anne saw that, and she said, I don't want the wine. I want the Boston Irish cream. And from that time on, we had to make sure we had that for her whenever she came to our house.
Oh, my gosh, thank you. Oh, yeah, Lindy. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, you can bring Mackie up. Yay. Hi, Mackie. Hi, buddy. Hi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lindy, and I have Mackie here. I think I probably knew her the least out of all of us here gathered today. However, I'm still very fortunate for a few brief moments. One thing that was really wonderful with caring for Mackie. Can you sit? Can you sit? Good boy. He's so smart, everyone. He's such a delightful dog to have the honor to care for. We would set up visits. They would be at least over an hour, at least once a week. And we definitely bonded over our shared love of crafts and fiber arts, and of course Mackie, and our love of animal education. And once in a while, when her feistiness would come out, when she would let me know how much she didn't like his bandana that day. But she was such a wonderful person, and even for a month or so, I really cherish the moments I got to spend with her. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other memories or things folks would like to share about Anne? I remember one time I went to visit her, and there had been a bear in the Los Alamos assisted living outside, and she said, and it came right up to my window. It scared the bejesus out of me. And then everyone was filing into her room to look at the bear outside, and that was a really exciting day at Los Alamos assisted living for sure. But she recounted that story to me for numerous days, and some of you heard that story, I think, too. So but that was an exciting day.
She hated Brussels sprouts.
Mike said she hated Brussels sprouts. Do you want to tell any more about that? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mike. So thank you all for sharing all of these stories, memories with this community today. And may all of these stories and memories that have been spoken, and that those that are unspoken, that remain with us as we go from this place today, may they stay with us. May these stories and memories continue to fill us with joy in our time of sorrow. And may we continue to share these stories together during our reception, so you will have more time over food, which she would approve of, as we know. So let's share those stories afterward as well. And we're going to lift the memory of Anne Durno Shafer up today in silence. And you have blessed so many of us here and our community, and we are blessed. So we want to sing this song in honor of you, because we have been blessed by your life, your woven tapestry. So let us stand in body and or spirit, if you would like, to sing our closing song, We Are Blessed. So my apologies on that song there, but we are indeed blessed by her life. And please remember to join us after the service in the fellowship hall for a time of reception where you can continue to share your beloved stories of Anne. And this is our closing benediction prayer. So let us enter into this time of prayer as we go out today, remembering the well-lived life of Anne Durno Shafer. Spirit of life and love, under the vast spiral of time and space surrounded by the simple blessings of a community of care and love, we carry these memories of Anne Shafer with us today. We give thanks for the life of Anne Shafer. Her memory lives on in the great spirit of life that surrounds us. Her legacy, work, service, and art, cherished by all of us, dwells deeply throughout us by the person she was and still is in our hearts. We celebrate and grieve through the cycles of life that we know are inevitable to go through as family and community. Spirit of love and life, remind us to love life as fully as we are able. Remind us to treasure our friends and families and community as Anne had treasured her friends, family, and her community. The gift of Anne's life is a treasure that cannot be ungiven. So we celebrate the life of Anne Durno Shafer, lived among us, and now her soul is at rest with her beloved Bob. Amen. And now our postlude will be the song that Anne commented on to Nyla one Sunday, saying, "Wow, that was a really upbeat, and I like that." So this song is for you, and this upbeat, turn the world around song. So let us process out and dance too, if you'd like. Please join us in the fellowship hall for a reception. Thanks.